He hid his mother's poverty and paid someone to pretend to be her. She stood just beyond the rose hedge, clutching a foil-wrapped pie and a suitcase with a broken zipper. The mansion before her gleamed under golden lights, laughter echoing from the grand windows. Margaret Ellis hadn't seen her son in over 2 years, but today she'd come all this way just to surprise him at his engagement party. Then she saw him. Daniel stood tall and polished in a tailored suit. By his side, a stunning woman, his fiancée, and next to them another woman, elegant and poised, smiling as guests toasted her. Then she heard it. "Everyone, please welcome my mother." But he wasn't pointing at her. He was pointing at the stranger. Margaret froze. Why had he replaced her? What had she done to deserve being erased from his life? And could a mother ever forgive something like that? Keep watching. This is a story you won't forget. Winters in Pine Hollow, a small Appalachian town in rural Pennsylvania, were long and bitter. The wind whipped down from the hills, rattling the windows of wooden cabins and turning the dirt roads into frozen veins of silence. In a weathered house at the end of Maple Lane, Margaret Ellis, a woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked hair and hands toughened by time, lit the stove before sunrise. She'd been a widow since her early 30s. Her husband, Alan, had died in a factory fire when their son Daniel was just a toddler. Since then, Margaret had carried the weight of both mother and father. With no savings, no family nearby, and no land to farm, she survived by baking homemade bread, cookies, and apple pies from scratch, selling them at the local farmers' market every week for nearly 2 decades. Her old Dodge pickup truck was her lifeline, just like the recipe book handed down from her mother. Every morning, even when the frost clung to the windows like a second skin, she rolled out dough with aching wrists and bundled loaves in gingham cloth. Her little stand at the corner of Hillcrest Square had become a quiet fixture in town. Though their meals were modest, lentil soup, cornmeal, sometimes just buttered bread, Margaret always made sure Daniel had the best part. "A full belly and a clear mind, that's all a boy needs to dream big," she'd often say with a tired smile. She never let him skip school, never let him go without a clean shirt, even if it meant turning down her own heat for the night. When Daniel was in elementary school, she'd wait outside in the snow, holding a thermos of cocoa and an old quilt just in case he was cold. At night, under the soft yellow glow of a second-hand lamp, he'd study while she hemmed jeans for neighbours to earn extra dollars. Her fingers, calloused and raw, would still brush his hair before bed. Everyone in Pine Hollow admired Margaret. She was quiet, proud, and never asked for more than she gave. Her home, though small and worn, was always clean. The mantel above the fireplace always bore a candle lit for her late husband and a Polaroid of Daniel in his school uniform, her only son, her only reason. Daniel was bright. He read voraciously, aced his classes, and talked of one day becoming someone who could fix things, maybe a lawyer, maybe a businessman, anything that would get his mom out of Pine Hollow. He got a full ride to the University of Pennsylvania, the first from their town in years. Margaret nearly fainted from joy when the letter arrived. She didn't understand the school rankings or scholarships, but she understood this: my boy's getting out. And she'd do anything to help. She sold her wedding ring. She took on extra shifts at the bakery. She learned to email badly, just to keep in touch. When the day came for Daniel to leave, the sun hadn't yet risen. Margaret packed a brown paper bag, turkey sandwich, apple slices, oatmeal cookies. She wrapped them like gold, stuffed them in his duffel. As the Greyhound bus pulled in, she hugged him tight. "You take care now. Don't skip meals. Don't forget where you came from." Daniel smiled, embarrassed. "I won't, Mom." She waved until the bus was a dot on the highway, her breath forming little clouds in the air. Her heart filled with hope and a strange, quiet ache. That winter, Margaret kept her phone close, checking it more often than she wanted to admit. Every short call, "Hey Mom, I'm good, love you," lit her up like a flame. When he called to say he got in, business major, top of the class, she sat down on the linoleum floor and cried like she hadn't in years. Not from grief, but because her boy was finally one step closer to the life she'd only ever dreamed of. But Margaret didn't yet know. The farther Daniel rose, the more invisible she would become in his new world. Philadelphia was a different universe. Daniel had never seen so many glass buildings, coffee shops, and people in tailored coats brushing past each other without a glance. At the University of Pennsylvania, everything moved faster. The classes, the conversations, the expectations. Daniel, in his worn jeans and thrift store jacket, quickly felt the gap between where he came from and where he was now. His roommates came from places like Greenwich, Palo Alto, and Manhattan. Their parents were surgeons, CEOs, or tenured professors. They ordered takeout from restaurants that Margaret wouldn't have walked past, let alone eaten from. Their laptops were new, their shoes imported. One even drove a Tesla. Daniel still used the same battered flip phone his mother gave him. At first, he was honest. He told people he grew up in a small town, that his mom sold baked goods at a local farmer's market. Some of them seemed intrigued, even impressed. But others just raised an eyebrow. One girl asked, "You mean like she does it for fun, or because she has to?" The way she said "has to" stayed with him for days. The shame crept in slowly. There was a party one night at a classmate's penthouse apartment. Daniel stood awkwardly in the corner, clutching a red cup, staring out over the glittering skyline. When someone asked what his parents did, he froze. Then, for the first time, he lied. "My dad passed. My mom runs a small business. Catering." It wasn't technically false, but it wasn't true either. That first lie made the second easier. The third came without hesitation. Soon, Daniel stopped replying to his mother's texts during the day. He never posted photos with her, never mentioned her when his new girlfriend, Caitlin Rhodes, a poised and confident marketing major from a Boston legacy family, asked about family. When Margaret called, asking, "Honey, can I visit sometime? Bring you some pie and warm socks?" He panicked. "No, Mom, I've got exams. It's really not a good time." Margaret, always sensitive to tone, didn't press. But her voice cracked slightly when she said, "Okay, sweetheart, I just miss you, that's all." Still, she packed a box of cookies and apple jam, sent it by mail, and waited for a text that never came. By the time Daniel graduated, magna cum laude, he was fully immersed in a life Margaret could never have imagined. He got a job at a leading tech consulting firm in New York City, where Caitlin had moved after accepting a position at her father's advertising agency. They moved in together in a sleek apartment in Soho, with stone countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows. Daniel had a new wardrobe, a new haircut, a LinkedIn page that made him look 10 years older, and not a single photo of Pine Hollow anywhere. One night, Caitlin brought up something unexpected. "My parents are coming to town next month. They want to meet yours. Maybe we can do dinner?" Daniel stiffened. He hadn't seen his mother in nearly 2 years. "They live out of state," he said carefully. "They don't travel much." Caitlin smiled. "Well, maybe we could go to them, or even just invite your mom. It would be nice." That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan. The thought of his mother, in her homemade knit cardigan, calling people sir and ma'am, asking for tap water at a Michelin-starred restaurant, made his stomach twist. It wasn't because he didn't love her. It was because he didn't think they would. And so the lies deepened. He told Caitlin that his mother was ill, that she wasn't able to travel, wasn't well enough to attend a formal dinner. Caitlin nodded, sympathetic, and didn't press further. But the guilt settled in like a weight he couldn't shake. Then came the engagement. Caitlin's father, an intimidating man with a presence like a Senate hearing, wanted a formal engagement party at the Rhodes family estate in Martha's Vineyard. "It'll be small," Caitlin said, but to her family, small meant champagne towers and a violin quartet. They asked Daniel to bring his mother for introductions. He said he would. Instead, he found someone else. The Rhodes estate in Martha's Vineyard was everything Margaret Ellis had never seen in her life. Sprawling gardens, a cobblestone driveway winding past rose hedges, and a manor so vast it seemed carved from marble and old money. But Margaret wasn't there. In her place stood Lillian Hart, a retired theatre actress in her late 50s with greying blonde curls and an elegant posture that screamed refinement. She had been hired through a high-end social liaison agency in Manhattan, a place discreetly known for supplying fake dates, fake assistants, and in Daniel's case, a fake mother. Daniel had met her in a cafe 2 weeks before the event. He handed her a binder, yes, a binder, with everything she needed, where they supposedly grew up, Vermont, how she lost her husband in a car accident, how Daniel earned a full ride through academic excellence, and how she had since retired after selling a small chain of bakeries. Lillian was good, too good. At the engagement party, she floated through conversations like royalty. She complimented Caitlin's mother's choice of wine, recounted fabricated tales of Daniel's childhood with such flair that even Daniel nearly believed them, and cried a perfectly timed tear when Caitlin toasted to the mothers who made us who we are. Daniel stood stiff beside her, glass in hand, smiling through his shame. Every toast, every compliment toward Lillian was another thread pulling at the fragile web of lies he'd spun. Far away in Pine Hollow, Margaret had just learned from an old neighbour, via Facebook of all things, that her son was engaged. She didn't cry. She didn't even call him. Instead, she quietly packed a small suitcase. Inside, she folded her only good dress, a pale blue one she'd saved for church. Then she wrapped a fresh apple pie in foil and tucked it beside a mason jar of her homemade strawberry jam. She didn't expect a grand welcome, just a glimpse, a moment. She took the train north. It took her nearly 2 days to reach the island, navigating subways, ferries, and 3 different buses. By the time she arrived at the estate, the sun was setting behind the waves. She stood at the front gate in her worn coat and clutching her modest suitcase. A man in a tailored suit stepped forward. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Margaret offered a gentle smile. "I'm Daniel Ellis's mother. I just wanted to see him. I won't cause a fuss." The man hesitated, then looked her over, from her calloused hands to her shoes dusted with ferry grime. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There's no one by that name here." Margaret pulled out a crumpled printout of the engagement announcement, the one her neighbour had shown her. She pointed to Daniel's name, smiling, proud even now. "That's my son." But the man's tone sharpened. "We have a strict guest list. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stepped aside and sat down on a nearby bench by the rose hedge, just close enough to see the warm lights inside. And then she saw him. Daniel, tall, polished, laughing. Next to him, Caitlin in a champagne-coloured dress. And beside them, another woman, beautiful, sophisticated, draped in pearls and silk. Daniel turned to her and smiling said something that made everyone laugh. Then he kissed her on the cheek. Margaret's hands gripped the edge of her suitcase. The foil of the apple pie was starting to tear. Her strawberry jam jar, still sealed, pressed hard against her knee. She understood. She was not welcome. She had no place in this version of her son's life. The sun dipped lower. The wind picked up. She rose without a word, walked slowly away from the estate, and caught the last ferry off the island. No one noticed. No one ever knew she had come. And Daniel never found out. Not yet, that the woman who baked for him every morning of his childhood had stood just yards away, watching him call someone else Mom. Weeks passed after the engagement party. Daniel's life moved forward, seamless and unshaken, on the surface. Wedding planning began. Caitlin's family offered to take care of the details, and Daniel was swept into a whirlwind of menu tastings, guest lists, and honeymoon ideas in the Amalfi Coast. But some nights, when the city was quiet and Caitlin had gone to bed, Daniel would catch his own reflection in the dark window, and he'd see someone he no longer recognized. Then, one afternoon, while reviewing vendor contracts at a downtown cafe, someone tapped him on the shoulder. "Didn't expect to see you here, Danny boy." He turned around. It was Eli Moreno, his old college roommate from Penn. Daniel blinked, surprised. "Eli? Man, it's been forever." Eli sat down, ordered a black coffee. No chit-chat, no warm-up, just a quiet look. "You know your mom came to the engagement party, right?" Daniel's heart skipped. "What?" "She came. Got turned away at the gate. I was there. Someone pointed her out. Said she was just some confused old woman. But I recognized her." Daniel said nothing. He couldn't. Eli leaned forward. "She sat on a bench by the hedge for almost an hour. She never said a word. Then she left, carrying a pie in a cracked suitcase." It hit like a fist to the stomach. Daniel's hands went cold. Eli didn't stop there. "I called her a few days later, found her number from your old contact sheet. She said you hadn't spoken in months. She didn't even know you'd moved." Daniel swallowed. His mouth was dry. I couldn't let people." Eli slammed his hand down. "You couldn't let people see your mother? The woman who used to send you socks with little notes? who worked 2 jobs so you could go to college debt-free. Daniel shrank into his seat. The shame he had kept buried now roared to life. Eli's voice dropped. I know you've done well, man. Big job, fancy apartment, but let me ask you this. When's the last time you asked your mom how she was doing? No answer. She didn't even cry when I spoke to her. She just said, tell him I understand. That's what broke me. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Instead, he pulled out an old shoebox from the top of his closet. Inside were pieces of a life he'd long ignored, a photograph of him and his mom at the county fair, a birthday card with $10 inside, a letter she once sent him with her oatmeal cookie recipe, just in case you miss home. By morning, he'd made up his mind. Daniel packed a bag, cancelled his meetings, and took the earliest train out of Penn Station. The ride to Pine Hollow took hours. With each passing mile, the building shrank, the cell signal faded, and the noise inside his head grew louder. When he arrived, it was late afternoon. The house looked smaller than he remembered. The roof sagged. The porch railing was crooked, but it was home. He stood at the gate for a long while, unsure if he had the right to knock. But then the door opened. Margaret stood there, thinner, older, wearing the same cardigan she'd had for years. Her eyes widened. Her breath caught in her throat. Daniel dropped his bag, his voice cracked. Mom? She didn't move. So he walked forward, slowly, until he was standing right in front of her, the son who had once left without looking back. And then he fell to his knees. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I've been such a coward. I was ashamed, not of you, but of being less than everyone else, and in doing that I threw away the only thing that ever made me someone worth becoming. Margaret didn't say anything for a long time. Then she knelt beside him, cupped his face in her weathered hands, and whispered, You came back. That's what matters. After that day, Daniel never returned to New York. He stayed in Pine Hollow. What began as a weekend visit stretched into weeks, then months. He moved into the spare bedroom of the house he once couldn't wait to escape, fixed the broken porch steps, replaced the leaky faucet, and scrubbed the mildew from the kitchen tiles. Margaret didn't ask questions. She didn't bring up the party, or the woman Daniel had paid to play her. Her forgiveness was wordless but whole, offered in steaming cups of tea and quiet nods during their morning walks around the backyard. In the evenings, Daniel would cook dinner, and they'd sit on the front porch watching the sun set behind the hills. He read to her from her old Bible, or helped her plant tulip bulbs before the first frost. The town watched in quiet awe. Some whispered, some asked questions, but most just smiled. They'd seen Margaret struggle for decades, and now, for the first time in a long time, she smiled too. Daniel didn't tell Caitlin he wasn't coming back. Eventually, she came looking for him. When she arrived and stood on the porch, wearing a sleek trench coat and perfectly pressed slacks, Margaret welcomed her with a warm, tired smile and offered her a slice of pumpkin pie. Inside, Daniel explained everything, the lies, the fake mother, the guilt that ate at him every night. Caitlin sat silently, and when he finished she said only one thing. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me who you really are? He had no answer. So she left, quietly, gracefully, and Daniel didn't follow. He knew he couldn't ask her to stay, not when he had just rediscovered what it meant to belong somewhere. But time, as it always does, caught up. Margaret's health declined. The fatigue came first. Then the loss of appetite. Then the quiet wheezing at night that Daniel could hear from the hallway. He took her to a doctor in the next town over. The tests came back. Congestive heart failure, likely undiagnosed for years. She refused the hospital. I've lived a full life, she said one night, her hand wrapped in his. I just want to be home, with you. So he stayed. He built a bookshelf in the living room. He baked bread with her old recipe. He turned down job offers, ignored voicemails from former colleagues, and gave up the city that once defined him. And on a soft spring morning he woke early and brewed her favourite tea. He cut a slice of warm cornbread, added honey, and brought it to her room. She didn't respond. Margaret lay still, her face peaceful, her hands clasping a crocheted handkerchief, one she'd made when Daniel was in 3rd grade. On the nightstand sat an envelope. His name was written on it in shaky but deliberate script. Inside, My Danny, I never needed you to be rich. I just wanted you to be kind. You found your way back. That's all a mother ever wants. Love you always. He sat there beside her for hours. No tears at first, just the ache of a silence too final to describe. The funeral was small. Neighbours brought casseroles, pies, and hand-picked flowers. Some brought stories. One elderly woman said, "She once shoveled my driveway in a blizzard." Another recalled she used to give extra cookies to the kids who couldn't afford them. But Daniel didn't speak that day. He couldn't. It was months later when he finally did something with his pain. He sold the car, closed his city bank accounts, and with what he had, he created a local scholarship fund, the Margaret Ellis Fund, for first-generation students from small towns. He also started a free weekend bake sale for single mothers, just like Margaret once was, and donated all the proceeds. Every child who received a cookie from the stand also received a note in the bag. Love your parents while you still can. Say it, show it, they won't ask, but they'll feel it forever. Daniel never left Pine Hollow again. He wore worn jeans, kept his mother's recipe book on the counter, and watered her tulips every morning. And sometimes when the sunrise hit the window just right, he'd close his eyes and swear he could hear her voice say, "There you are, my boy, right where you belong."